To begin with, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about myself as an artist, a little bit of background very quickly, because I'm trained as a technical scientific illustrator, so I'm trained to paint things almost in hyperrealism. That's my background. On leaving college, I couldn't actually get a job because they always wanted somebody with 5 years experience. So I'm very blessed. I played the piano and I was given a position in a rock band and became a pop star. That's another story for another day. When I grew up, I got my first job illustrating a series of books called the Hidden Places series. They actually still print the books today, but instead of using illustrations, they use photographs. My job was to do all the little drawings in the book, the architectural drawings. I was probably doing about 40, 50 drawings a week, which is quite a lot of drawings and a few paintings for front covers and things like that. So I was actually earning a living from just drawing and painting. The living really just paid the bills, and that was it. When I discovered pastels, that sort of changed my life completely. I went from, it turned me from an illustrator into an artist, if that makes sense. I absolutely love pastels. And then I discovered PanPastels, and that was even better. I'd like to tell you a little bit about PanPastels before I start, and how I was introduced to them, because I don't think I would have actually gone out and purchased some PanPastel straight away. Many people, when I'm demonstrating, think I'm using makeup and things like that, which is rather disappointing. But when they see the results, they change their mind. PanPastel is different to pastel, but they do actually work together. I think what I love about PanPastel most is its transparency. It's incredible. Sometimes it feels more like I'm painting with watercolor, a dry watercolor, if that makes sense. The transparency, the mixing like paint, the ability to rub out, to use mixed media. It's endless, really, what you can do. I just love them. So I'm going to demonstrate today a couple of skyscapes. Well, three actually. One's only a very quick one, so but two skyscapes on a different paper. This paper I'm using today is Pastelmat. It's different to the Canson Mi-Teintes, which I normally use, and I'm using, to begin with, a dark grey. Then I'm going to use a white Pastelmat, and you'll see the difference. And I'm going to use these fantastic sponges to paint with. I think this is one of the big differences, and one of the great things for me, from a pastel stick where you're drawing sort of all the time, to this, and it's a completely different thing, but it feels like you're painting more than drawing, if that makes sense. And the blending capabilities, incredible, and to be able to draw over, which I'm going to do with lots of inks and things like that when we get into that. So I'm going to switch over to the painting. Bear with me. I should do, anyway. 1 second. There you go. Got worried then. So, yeah, I'm going to do this little skyscape. And I'll try and tell you what colors I'm using as I'm using them. So I'm using a little bit of orange tint here, just to start to get some color on the paper. What I love about the this painterly effect, look at these marks that you can make. They're absolutely beautiful. So it's just a gentle wipe on the paper. So I'm putting my light colors on first. I always say to people when I'm teaching is that it's not easy to copy a photograph, but I always believe in there doesn't seem to be too much point, if that makes sense. So I try to encourage people to develop a style of painting. This is a lovely way of, it really is a lovely way of painting. And these marks, I suppose, are the if I was painting with pastel, for instance, I would almost block in the pastels I'm working. So this is more or less the same, but I get these lovely little marks that come off the paper too. Really is lovely to work with. And because the grain of PanPastel is 10, I think it's about 10 times smaller. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bernie. I think it's about 10 times smaller. It's hugely smaller than a grain of pastel from a standard stick. It doesn't fill the tooth very quickly. So you've got all the tooth to still work and play with pastel afterwards if you want. So I always find that there's so many opportunities to amend, change if you wanted to. But the difference, I think, between Pastelmat and the Pastelmat and, say, for instance, Canson Mi-Teintes is that Pastelmat almost grabs the pigment very quickly, and it's not as maneuverable as, say, Canson Mi-Teintes or a watercolor paper. I very often use watercolor papers. Great for pastels.
Les, can I ask a couple of questions?
Of course.
Do you have a photo reference for this one?
No.
Okay.
No. Well, I have something that when we have a break, I will show you where it was inspired from, if that makes sense. It's nothing like the one in the photograph, but that's something that I would normally go through on a workshop and explain. Because I don't believe in copying from photographs, I make lots of changes, and I never copy photographs, if that makes sense. So those are the sort of things that I would deal with in great depth at a workshop, because, like I said, I just don't believe in copying from photographs.
And then another question was, isn't light to dark unusual for the pastel medium?
Yes, but in this, because of the transparency of PanPastel, you have to work. I find that working light to dark is the way. If you were doing, for instance, if you were doing a watercolor, you would not put on your darks and then begin to add the lights over the top, because basically it wouldn't work. So this has got that beautiful transparency with it. It has to be the same, if that makes sense.
That's great. And then somebody else said, are you using two colors just now or just making a heavier mark?
I've used orange tint, a little bit of orange there, tiny bit of dairy light yellow, and now I'm mixing a little bit of ultramarine tint. I'm making sure that the blues that I use on this are blue violets, not blue greens. Otherwise, we will end up in a little bit of a mess, because we'll end up with a green sky. And the yellows I'm using are on the color wheel. They'll be heading towards blue violets rather than, if that makes sense. So yellows towards red orange and blues towards blue violets. And your blue, you can always add a touch of, for instance, so that blue ultramarine tint, a touch of magenta there. We'll just take it slightly warmer towards violet magenta, so it's got a little bit of red in it then. What I do suggest is when you do paint with PanPastel is to have a strip at the side while you're working. You can then test your color before applying it to the paper. If you don't do that, it's a bit of a wild stab in the dark, or a guess what color you're going to get on there, because you perhaps mix in a little bit of that magenta with that ultramarine. Not too sure exactly. I've got used to them now, so I really more or less know what color I'm going to get on there. But test it. Once you're happy with that, then you can begin to paint with that. And again, I can do so much work on this without it having hardly any impact on the tooth, which is absolutely wonderful, because I'll be able to go over this with pastel if I want to do afterwards, to create a little bit of light, for instance, perhaps. I don't know. We'll have a little bit of that in there. It starts to look more like a painting, doesn't it, than a pastel. I find them absolutely fascinating. I really do. I want that warm orange stroke red yellow, red orange underneath to come through these colors that I'm putting on now, so it gives that sort of complete connection between the scene. Because this color that I'm putting on, this magenta and this blue here, I can still see the red orange underneath there. It's still apparent, it's still there.
I have a few questions, Les.
Fire away.
Okay, can you show us how you clean the sponges between colors?
Yes, indeed. If you take just an ordinary, let's take a sponge, and we'll take a paper towel. We'll take a paper towel there. So I'll take a little bit of, say that, violet, apply that to the paper there. I can then take the sponge, just clean it on the paper towel. It may look as though it's stained, but if I just take a yellow there, yeah, you can still paint with it. It's just sort of, because the pigment's so highly pigmented, the color's so highly pigmented, it almost dyes the color of the sponges. They'll never look like that again, believe me. But you can see quite easily how you can work with just a couple of sponges. Okay, does that answer that one?
It does, I think.
Good.
Do you, there's a couple of questions about using watercolor paper. Do you prefer rough, hot pressed, or cold pressed?
When it comes to watercolor papers, I think the best approach is to have something that's got a little bit of tooth, but it's not too rough, if that makes sense. As long as it's got a little bit of texture to it. I love texture. That's important. So, and I think it's important for the pastel, the PanPastel to adhere to. So I use a couple of watercolor papers. Moulin de Roy from Canson is a beautiful watercolor paper, but generally speaking, most watercolor papers will work with PanPastel as long as it's not too smooth. If it's too smooth, and it's not very cotton based. The richness of the cotton, if that makes sense, just holds. It almost embeds itself in the fibers of the paper, and that then it's there. It's permanently there unless you rub it out with a rubber, which you can do. So yeah. So let's just add a few darker clouds here. I love this magenta. It's absolutely. So I'm just using a little bit of that magenta. And we'll have a little bit more light just down here. So I'm going to put some darks against there just to create our focal point, if that makes sense. Let's have some darker clouds just coming in here. The blending is just amazing. Just lighten it up a little bit there because I'm going to go slightly darker towards the bottom there. We'll have a few darker clouds just up there. It's great. I love it. So painterly. Absolutely. Okay. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to add some darks here just to put something in place for suggestions of buildings and things like that. So I'll add some marker pens to these afterwards. So you can get really good, strong values with PanPastel. I was saying to somebody the other day how a lot of people just use them for backgrounds, and it's a little bit why, you know, they're very good for painting completely. So I'm going to bring a little bit of water down there now. So I'm just going to swap my sponge over. Now, the sun's just come out here, so I'm just going to shut my blinds. Technical glitch.
And this might be a good time for me to run through some quick
Yes.
questions. We've got
Yes.
lots, so I'm going to
Okay.
as many as I can. Can I buy a white Pastelmat paper and tone it gray with PanPastel color?
Yes, it will have a little bit of impact on the tooth, but very minimal. Yes, yeah, the answer. But they do light grays. I'd be tempted to just get a lighter grey. But what I found, I don't know how rubbing alcohol works on Pastelmat, but I use the pencil blend. But this tends to bleed a little bit into the Pastelmat, so I wouldn't recommend using pencil blend. How alcohol works on, or how rubbing alcohol works in it, may be a different matter. But I'm going to use inks. I'm going to use some inks, and I'll show you how they work on the top, which is really quite interesting, to be honest with you. So let me just take a little bit of. I need something darker for the C here. Now, I could. There's a few ways of doing this. I can either take a piece of card. Let me just place that on there, like so. Take my color, just to get a straight line there. So, or I could use a ruler. A ruler would work just fine. But I want a straight line there for the horizon line for the C there. Just to get a little bit of color in. Wants to be a little bit darker than what's in the sky. Give me a nice straight line. So got that in place. Again, very little impact on the tooth, which is really good. So I'm going to look at the reflections in the wet sand that I'm going to create here. I'm going to create some wet sand there. So I'm going to take my yellow oranges, orange reds, these warmer colors, and sort of drag down a little bit to create a little bit of vertical depth in what I think is going to be the reflective area of wet sand. Make sure I get lots of this color in. Vertical depth. I don't know if anyone's completely familiar with Pastelmat, but it is a lovely, soft, almost like velvety wet and dry. It's wet and dry is like a very, very smooth sandpaper, so it's not rough like sandpaper, but it's got that feeling of, you know, it's if you touch the surface with a tiny bit of pastel, it'll grab that pastel, if that makes sense. So I'll just drop a little bit down here. All my vertical reflections in, because this is wet sand that we've got here. So I'm going to drop a little bit of the beach. So using a little bit of magenta, brown there, we'll take the slight angle of, say, 3-4 degrees. Just gives it a little bit of slope there. See how they blend, all the colours just blend into each other. It's beautiful. I'm using a little bit of the magenta extra dark there. Look how they just beautifully blend together, don't they? Look at that transparency across the surface. Absolutely gorgeous. Just want a little bit of reflection of maybe these colours in the sea there. So I'm going to use a little bit of that magenta.
Les, what colors did you use for the buildings?
The buildings, in my colour palette here, I've got a black. So I've used, I mixed a little bit of black to increase value, yeah, of any of the colours. I've got a red iron oxide extra dark there, which gives those really rich, warm colours. One of my favourites, which is the magenta extra dark, beautiful. It's got a lovely warmth about it. So although it's a dark value, it's when mixed with the black and the red oxide and even a little bit of violet extra dark, you've got incredibly strong warm values as well. Okay, they really do give you a good sense of real good strong values, which are important. So I'm going to do some waves. So I'm just going to take just take these a little bit further along. Just put a few little there's got to be a connection between the two. Let's come in a little bit here with that magenta. These, if I take a tiny little bit of, say, that magenta there, I can use the corner of one of the sponges to just put little marks. Beautiful. Okay, so before I go into that sea, let me just show you how I can use some of these marker pens. I've got a variety of marker pens here. I've got some Pro markers, which are basically, these are Winsor Newton Pro markers. They're alcohol-based marker pens. A lot of illustrators use them. You'll have probably different ones in the States and different parts of the world. As long as they're light fast and transparent, alcohol based, I think there's lots of different ones that will work absolutely fine. These are Daler Rowney mixed media paint markers that I can basically fill with inks. So I use Daler Rowney Aquafine inks, but you can use different inks, as long as, again, if they're water based, they tend to have no impact on the tooth. A lot of my work is based on getting so far into a painting and I've still got all the tooth of the paper to then begin to work with, if I want to do with pastel. So I could do this painting, and I show students when I'm working in the UK live that you can actually do another painting over the top because it's had such a little impact on the tooth of the paper, PanPastel, because of this microscopic grain, that when I come to use pastels, I could change even the darks, go over with a white and change it completely. So I could literally do another painting. But let me just show you how these marker pens work. So they'll slightly strengthen the and they almost turn it into paint. let's do, I'll use a very light grey for you, just so you can see how it just slightly, it's almost transparent and gives that sense of, you can draw with it. Again, little or no impact on the tooth. Or if I use it, say down here, watch. This is for some of those, you know, when the waves have come in and they've gone back out again, and they go, yeah. I don't have to worry if I don't like anything there, I can change it. It's not absolutely not a problem. But now, if I take these are the ink pens. So you'll see again the value, incredibly strong. You see how that makes a huge impact on the, and to say because they don't really, because of PanPastel being such a fine grain, it doesn't have much impact on the nib of the ink pen. It's still absolutely fine. So let's first, I'm going to take a hard white pastel. I'm just going to add a few little waves here. So this is just a little Conti crayon. And because I've got all the surface, it's perfect. I'm going to take a light pastel just for the sky, just for a moment. Just a light pastel, because I want to bring that light just down a little bit further down here. Then I'm going to drag this. Let's use a few light blues just out here on the surface. Use my sponge just to soften some of these edges.
Is your surface flat or is it slightly elevated?
It's about 30 degrees. About 30 degrees. I'm just going to go with a little bit more white, just I want real sort of shimmering light just underneath here. Beat that up a little bit. Just around here, we'll just increase the sparkle. And then we'll put a few as though there's a few lights on here and there in the city, wherever it is. Let's drop that down a little bit. Maybe a couple of light blues just up the top there. Again, this is completely sort of adaptable. But how is that? The marker pens, I say, are absolutely fantastic for just adding that special. I'll just add a few little.
Les, when you use those markers, it looks like somebody's commented, it looks like they don't smear when you rub across. Is that correct? The line doesn't smear.
The inks.
Yes, I think that's the
well,
question.
the inks or the markers, because the inks are water-based, but they dry very quickly. Yeah. So once they're dry, that won't go anywhere. But I can change it with pastels. So if I didn't like the mark that I made there, I could easily change it. I could absolutely easily change it with pastel. All this is completely changeable with pastel. I say the little marker pens, the alcohol-based marker pens, again are they won't move once they're on. It's almost like takes the pigment and makes it sort of permanent on the paper. That won't rub out, but this, this will rub out. So the where I've worked here, for instance, this will rub out. Yeah, this won't. This I've made permanent with inks and marker pens, although still change with pastel. It's the best of all worlds, really, if you think about it, because you've constantly got the ability to continue to change and develop, which is wonderful. That's why I love PanPastel, because no matter what paper I'm working on, I've got so many options. If I do all my animal portraits and things like that, and portraits 80% with PanPastel, I've got still so much to still work with other mediums and pastel pencils and ink pens and various other mediums to change, because it has such a little impact on the tooth of the paper, but still gives me that impact, that value, and in an amazingly painterly fashion. What more can I say? I love them.
Somebody asked if can you wet the color on the paper, the PanPastel color on the paper with an alcohol water wash?
With rubbing alcohol, I think yes, but not with water. Water sort of repels it a little bit, it seems to do. Yeah, because it's such a fine. It's like when you drop water onto dust, it doesn't really. It sits on the top, doesn't it?
Yes.
So it's the same. It's the same kind of thing. I would. There is another thing that I can show you now, which I prepared a couple of little trays here. Let me just switch back to. But this. Oh, wait, I have wrong camera. Excuse me. So this is it's just a PanPastel top there. What I've done is I've diluted it with the alcohol. Yeah. So basically, if I take a little bit of, make it into paint, you'll see what happens. So you can paint with it, but what happens with the pencil blend is it seems to blend out a little bit, but I don't think alcohol would do the same, if that makes sense. This is pencil blend, so it's slightly different. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this. I'm going to show you this on a different paper, and I'll show you how to paint with it. So I can turn any of the PanPastels into another color and start to paint, which I'm going to show you now, actually.
We always, coming from the color side, color maker side, we always recommend keeping the pan surface itself dry. So when you use any,
yes,
liquid, use it on the paper. So you would put your color down first, and then introduce.
That's right. Yes. So let me show you this, because this is I like that. Let me show you this. So if anybody wants to do this workshop next week, I'll be doing this workshop in depth, in great depth. Let me show you this now. Can you see close up? See the transparency of the medium in the distance there? So let me show you this. This is quite funny because it's got a footprint on it, and while we were painting it fell on the floor and I stood on it. So it's got my trainers just there. Can you see that? But not to worry, all parts of live demonstrating. Never worked with children, animals or artists on the telly. So let me just show you what happens here. So what I've done, ignore all this because it's just for demonstrating the sky. What I've done here is I've used on here, this is Canson Mi-Teintes. This is a cotton-based French paper, 50% cotton, but it is a pastel paper. So it works absolutely beautiful with PanPastels. It's one of my favorite papers for PanPastels. One reason is it's this cotton richness, and it's fantastic. So I've used on here a little bit of ultramarine tint, a little bit of ultramarine tint, a little bit of ultramarine, a little bit of violet shade, maybe a little bit of that, I'm not too sure, just to slightly darken a few clouds here and there. So almost like it's not a flat sky, but it's also it's got no highlights. So I'm going to use the eraser to do the highlights of the clouds. Okay, so watch what you can do. It's amazing. So we'll just take the eraser. And I can take out any of these different pressures, take out just a little bit more of the pigment. So if I press on a little harder, I'll get a sharper line there. Let's just take, sorry about my footprint there. Let's bring in something from down there. Just I'm just working rather loosely and quickly here, but I think you can get the gist of what it's capable of.
And the eraser you like to use is it's a hard vinyl eraser, isn't it?
It's just a it's just a cheap plastic eraser. the, the reason I don't use putty rubbers for this is because it'll just pick up the colour and spread it around a little bit.
Yeah.
Where because this is sort of plastic, I can clean it on a piece of paper or wipe it with a cloth, and it's all right again then.
Yes, yeah, that we like that too, and it works on. You can erase on almost any surface with pen.
Yeah, yeah, but look at those for cumulus clouds. Aren't they fantastic? So the other thing I wanted to show you is, so I took the pen before, the paintbrush, and I've mixed a little bit of that green with let's mix a little bit of that phthalo dark with create another green, and then watch this, I can paint on here. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm painting, as you can see, because it turns it into paint. Is that wonderful? So I take the really dark. Now this doesn't spread on here, so if I got a really fine little brush, do some beautiful little furs. Look at that, you can paint. All of a sudden, I'm painting now.
Someone's just saying they didn't think you could use wet medium on the Canson paper.
Yes, because this is rubbing alcohol. This is pencil blend. It dries instantly. It doesn't. What it doesn't do is make the paper but water would. You can't use water on this paper, but this because it's pencil blend, it doesn't have any impact again on the. It's not. It dries instantly. That's dry now. It almost just soaks into the cotton, dry. But look at that, isn't it great to be able to paint? I just wanted to show you that because it opens so many doors up. I mean, all this that I've done there, again, no impact on the tooth. I could start to use pastels then. I could start to use pastels. I haven't used any yet, but you've got so far into your painting, completely changeable, and that's one of the things that I love about pans, to be able to continue to change, develop, and move on. Pencil blend is it an American product or British? Pencil blend, do you know, to be honest, I'm not too sure, but rubbing alcohol will do exactly the same thing. Yeah, what it does is it just mixes with because it's alcohol. This is alcohol based. It works exactly the same way. It mixes, it turns the pigment into paint. You can paint with it. It dries instantly, and it doesn't have that wetting effect on the paper. Again, it doesn't fill the tooth. It's just brilliant. It's like having, it's like being able to do painting. If there's something you don't like, you can change it. So, and I got to admit, for teaching purposes, there's nothing better, because you can go back in and say that's not quite right, but let's change it, and we change it, and we can do it again. So it's got so many possibilities. What do you think? Those clouds, they look like proper cumulus nimbus clouds, all with an eraser, or if you're an American, a razor.
As somebody asked, instead of the eraser for the subtractive effect that you did there, could you use like a white Conte pencil or pastel?
Exactly, yes, exactly. You can use just an ordinary white pastel. It will work exactly the same. You're so right with that, yes. Yes.
And then somebody, sorry, one more thing on the
yes,
the pastel, the wet solution that you did.
Yes.
Can you is it fully permanent then, or they wanted to know if it can be painted? This is the exact question. Can you move the pastel paint after you've painted it on the wet solution?
No.
No.
But you can change it with pastel. You can
Yes.
change it with pastel, but you can't do anything with it because it's made it permanent. It's almost turned it into a permanent paint. Yeah. So that's, yes. So what I'm going to do is have a drink of water, and I'm going to do another painting for you on white pastel mat. So any questions while I'm
Yes.
putting this together?
Do you ever use pastel ground? So to put on your surface?
Oh, I only sort of take a little bit of pigment off the, mix it into one of the palettes to mix with rubbing alcohol or pencil blend, to be quite honest with you. I don't scrape it off any other way because to be honest with you, my main thing is using the sponges. The sponges are so much like painting, and they're enough for me, to be quite honest with you. I just love the sponges.
How about fixative? Do you use fixative?
Fixative, yeah, fixatives. I don't tend to use very much fixative, to be quite honest with you, because I found that it doesn't need it. Because I paint, when I'm painting on Canson Mi-Teintes, which is the cotton paper, very often, switch back to me. So when I'm using the Canson Mi-Teintes, which is the cotton rich paper, very often I will paint more like a watercolor effect, like this. So more like a watercolor than pastels, if it makes sense. So yeah. So what was the question?
Do you use fixative? And can I just add
Yes,
something?
yes.
Sorry,
Yes.
I'll just add something here from our side, because a lot of people ask us this, and they say, because some people like to have that comfort of fixing the final layer or earlier layers, even to isolate the layers with fixative. We always
Yes.
say use the best one you can. So there's some really good brands of spray
Yes.
pastel fixative out there.
Yes. I've been using Royal Talons, but a good fixative, any good fixative will do that. I tend not to fix on Canson Mi-Teintes because the pigment almost embeds itself into the fibers of the paper, so it's not going anywhere. It really isn't. But a fixative will slightly push the color, like just that, like 1% slightly darker, and it almost, because I paint very much like a watercolor effect, I get that, just that little bit more depth in it, a little bit more value. So it actually has a good a positive effect rather than a negative effect that sometimes can happen with pastels. So the Mi-Teintes, Canson Mi-Teintes is probably one of my favorite papers for PanPastels because of the way it's developed me as an artist to want to paint almost like a pastelist stroke watercolorist, because I love to paint watercolor, but the two combined is like, hey, this is new. It's given me like a new lease of life, because it's like two mediums mixed together, and I can do all these things with it. So that's my favorite paper. But the Pastelmat is a beautiful paper again. I do all my portraits on there, things like that. But the skies, again, it's great because it has this painterly effect. It looks like a palette knife. Some people, they don't know whether they're oils or they just don't know. They don't know what they are, which is, again, fascinating. So the mark making with the sponges is definitely for me. So let me do this other painting for you quickly.
Yes.
How are we doing for time? All right.
You've got half an hour, and
Oh,
do you like
plenty.
the smooth side or the waffles? I'll just sneak a question in. The smooth
Oh,
side.
yes, yes. Oh, the orange peel textured side. Definitely. Orange peel textured all the way. Yes, yes. Got to have a little bit of texture for PanPastel and for my pastels. I like a little bit of texture. I'm generally a landscape artist, so those things are incredibly important. A seascape without texture is not a seascape, and same with a landscape, really. So this one is a skyscape. I don't need hardly any. It's just, I just made this up, to be quite honest with you. It's just like some trees on the horizon. So I'm just going to, again, block in my warm light colors first. A little bit of yellow, dairy light yellow there, mixed with that beautiful orange tint. Mixing with a little bit of, I'll try and put the palette there so you can see what I'm doing. So a little bit of white mixed with those, it just takes the value down a little bit more diluted. It gives it a, it I don't know whether it makes me more creative with what I'm doing, or if that makes sense. I feel more creative with PanPastel. I sometimes just paint light and not even work from photographs. I'll just see what comes out, if that makes sense. So tiny touch of pink in here, I think. You tend to see the color more as it is with the white paper.
Do you ever use UArt or some of the sanded papers?
I have used UArt before, although as long as you've got some old sponges that you're not too bothered about, because it will destroy the sponges with it being a sanded paper, so you'll get lots of bits on. But it's, if you, I tend to use more. I tend to use more of a painted effect, so I'll probably do more of an underpainting on the UArt with, say, the PanPastel pigments, if that makes sense, and rubbing alcohol to create an underpainting probably before I started work, if I was honest. But they will damage the sponges because of the roughness of the surface.
And with UArt, you can get different
you get different grades, yes.
Grades. So that helps going for the slightly smoother sand paper. But the other thing, I'm sure you find this too, Les, is that when you're working on the different papers, the more textured papers give you a more intense color when you apply, whereas the smoother, it's a more transparent color.
Yes, yeah. I say that that's one of the reasons that the Mi-Teintes so beautiful for my work, is because of it's a very delicate paper, and it has that. It's almost, it is like using a watercolor paper. There's no doubt about it. I'm just going to adjust the light. I think the sun's gone in now, so all change. I want you to see it as it is, if that makes sense. Yeah, that's better. I want to see you to see the colors really as truly as they are.
Do you ever use velour paper?
No, it's not on my bucket list. It's too velvety. It's too. I can't get any texture with it. It's just not a paper for me. It's nice for furry, fluffy animals, but again, if I was honest, Pastelmat's a far better paper. I've just got to admit, it does everything. It's got a little bit of more of a bite to it. It's for me, it's a better paper. So velour is not. I've tried to sort of get in there and enjoy it, but I just can't get to grips with it. I really can't. I have tried though. So sorry about that, velour. No offense.
I've always found velour challenging as well.
Yes, it really is. It's just not for me, unfortunately. So I'm going to use a little bit more magenta tint there. I don't think you see it properly. Magenta tint with that orange, tiny touch of red. Test that colour, and we'll start to put some good marks on here. Oh, it's almost like it starts to create energy, and I get a bit excited then because of this. There's nothing worse for me when painting and it's got no expression in it. It's a little bit flat, you know, lifeless. This medium, again, I think because I wouldn't paint like this in pastel. I wouldn't paint with the same sort of energy, I suppose. It gives me this painterly, this brush. It's almost like my brush, and it. Because I was using pastel here, it just wouldn't be transparent like this. Add a little bit of ultramarine to this. I'm going to have a low horizon line. So I've got what I call the second value on there. So I've got the light, warm orange, red yellows, red, orange, yellows there. Then a sort of second value of magentas, touch of red. So the warm values underneath. Then I can start adding a further value. So just a little bit more of a blue into that, blue-grey, and we can start to increase some of the values, maintaining the transparency, I think, underneath to keep that colour harmony. And then I'll introduce some blues.
Do you only use the sponges for your landscapes, or do you use the knives and covers as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, to be quite honest with you, I'll use some of the knives in a moment. The knives are really interesting, again, for mark making, because I had a chap come on a workshop, and he was actually a palette knife painter. So he used his knife in exactly that way to create little squares. So he used it like that to create these, but he was doing just square blocks. But it's great for doing shapes. Really interesting. I forgot I got them there actually, Bernie. Thank you for that. They are good. They are really good. They get a little bit more control, I think. So if you want nice sharp lines, you can actually get them. People think you can't, but you actually can. You can get some good, really good, strong values. But let me just start to block a few. I want to finish. Well, I'm not bothered about finish on time actually. if nobody else is, but I'm sure everybody's got the pub to go to and stuff. And, oh no, you haven't.
It's
But
too
let's put. It's sorry.
too early in Pennsylvania.
Oh, is it? Let's block some blues in here now.
Somebody is asking if you use blending stumps.
Blending stumps.
Like tortillon. Tortillon? You know, the little, you can buy them for blending pastel sticks.
Oh, are they plastic?
They're like a paper covered.
Oh yes, yes, yes. No, I don't use them because I don't really need them, to be quite honest with you. I don't no, I don't need them for my sort of style of painting. And I think they'd work with pastels more, wouldn't they, than PanPastels? I don't know.
Yeah, because the PanPastel does blend so easily because it's really
It does, yeah.
with it. It's a different technique.
And they blend so beautifully with the the sponges, so you don't really need that.
What are your thoughts on framing under glass? Do you?
Always, yes.
Yes, yeah, because
Yes.
we always tell people, because it is a pastel at the end of the day, to treat it for framing as a pastel medium.
Yes.
Do you double matte?
Yes.
Okay.
Always, yeah. Oh, that's the ice cream van. Anybody want an ice cream? Oh, that's funny that. We live down a very quiet cul-de-sac, and there's generally no noise. But now the man from Amazon's arriving, so he's going to knock on the door now because he's got some parts from my bathroom.
And Les, I'm just going to, somebody has asked about light fastness, and I was just going to give some information.
Yes, if you would, yes.
As the manufacturer, we spent 5 years developing PanPastel and one of the formulations, and one of the things we took so long on was the light fastness. It's really important to us because you don't want to spend all that time on a painting and then for it to fade, or sell it and then it fades at your client's house. So we get all our final formulations independently tested by an outside light fastness testing place, and they do an accelerated light fastness testing, so we can test up to 100 years. And there are standards in our industry, so all the good manufacturers work to the ASTM light fastness standards. There isn't a pastel standard, so we use the colored pencil standard that was around when we started developing the range. So all our labels, all our color charts have the light fastness rating that was given to us by the independent testers.
So we'll just go a little bit darker here. I'm going to go a little bit darker towards the horizon there. Just then I'm going to put some real darks in. I'll start with PanPastel. So I'm going to use the black, the magenta extra dark, and the red oxide there. And we'll just shape in some tree shapes there, just to get. Mainly, I want here the shapes.
If you frame under glass, do you use fixative or not?
Still no, with on the Mi-Teintes, and I think I would only really, because I don't put an awful lot on, if that makes sense. I don't pile the PanPastel, I don't pile the pastels on. even when I'm painting with ordinary stick pastels, I won't overfill the tooth. I never do. I'm a great believer in less is more.
And knowing when to pull back from the painting.
Yeah, you know, we all tend to. I've noticed through obviously through teaching that the tendency is to overfill pastel. That's probably one of the biggest problems we come across, is overfilling the tooth of the paper. So yeah, less is always more for me.
And then, sorry, I hope I'm not distracting you too much.
No, not at all.
Do you mix colors on the palette always, or do you, sorry, on the pans, or do you also mix on a scrap of paper?
Okay, so yeah, there is, when I'm using the Mi-Teintes, I'll just get a little bit of Mi-Teintes here. So when I'm using the Mi-Teintes, if I'm mixing, for instance, we could take a little bit of red, a little bit of orange, stay there, and I could perhaps, after a slightly different color, add a little bit more magenta to that. So stay. So I could actually use that then to pick up, and so I'll do a little bit of painting work with that. I could still take a little bit more from there. So it almost acts a little bit like a palette, or use even a smoother paper so that it doesn't embed itself in the fibers, if that makes sense. But I use this almost like as a bit of a palette. I can pick up and take a little bit more from it. So it's a good idea to test. As I say, I've got used to pans now, and I almost know what color I'm getting from what I'm using. So it's not too worrying. So I'm just going to swap to the sponges again, because I just want to put a few marks in here. So light yellow down there. So we'll spread that colour down a little bit as well.
A few people are commenting on how they look creamy when you're applying them, but actually they're dry. It's a dry medium.
Oh yes, definitely, completely dry. Yeah, this is that thing where it reminds you of painting. It just totally reminds me of painting.
And that was our motivation when myself and Lad developed them, we looked at all the different mediums out there. We've both been in the art materials industry for a long time, and the pastel medium hadn't changed since the late 1500s. It's always been in that stick form. So we looked at the limitations of the pastel stick, and then we looked at areas that we felt we could bring a different experience to the medium, and that's why we put it in the pan so that it could be applied like a paint.
Let's just use a few little pastels in here. We'll add a little bit of light just with a pastel stick, just to go in there where I made that complete cock up. Just add a little bit of pastel over the top. This will blend, you know, but let's just, we'll take a few.
Do you use them on canvas? And if so, what kind of prep do you use?
On canvas, you can actually use them on canvas. What I've used them on a canvas sheeting, and what I actually did was sprayed the, it's a prime canvas, sprayed the canvas with some fixative. Then I did some PanPastel work, fixed it, and then did pastels over the top, and it worked really well actually. So the answer is yes, you can. You can do all sorts. Let's just have a little bit of blue coming in across there. Cool.
While you're working there, I'll just say somebody asked about mixing on a glass palette, and I don't recommend that because the palette has no tooth at all. It's super slick, super smooth, so it wouldn't hold the colors for mixing.
Interesting, yes.
Do you use the colorless blender?
I haven't used it very much, to be quite honest with you, so I can't really comment on that. I'd be making things up, and I don't like doing that. So I haven't really used the colors blender too much, but I wish you could see the colors as they really are. I'm not sure you can, because they look absolutely fabulous here. See, that is just PanPastel there, and I've got so much scope to work into that. But if I just take that, maybe you see with the white, it has a lot more in real life. I think it has a lot more depth to the color that perhaps you've seen. It has a lot. This is slightly darker. Everything's slightly darker in real terms, but I think that sort of shows how it works quite nicely on PanPastel. What do you think?
Fabulous, really great, and in such a short amount of time, Les.
Well, I mean, they cover very, very, very quickly, and let me just switch to me. Yeah, they cover very, very quickly. They are the painterly effect. I can get something down in 5 minutes that inspires me to want to build and build on that. And those painterly marks, as you saw in the beginning of that one, almost like full of energy. And for skies, there's nothing better. Let's face it, there's nothing better than energy in the sky. That's what you need.
People were asking about the colors, and I mean, I'm sure you go into that in a lot more detail in your classes, color theory, because that's a whole other.
Yes. I'm a very harmonious artist. I believe as an artist that everything's reflective. It doesn't matter what it is. The reason a lot of my skies work so well is that there's an underlying color that comes through in every part of the sky, and that's that connection between the sky that's true, if that makes sense. And the transparency of pans obviously works so well in this case. But yeah, I believe that everything's reflective. If you look around you, you'll see that the shirt is reflected onto the wall that you're wearing and things like that, and it's even reflects onto matte surfaces, but in different proportions. It may only be 3%, but it's still there.
A few other questions. What favorite place inspires you for skies?
Oh,
We only have
skies.
2 minutes.
All right, okay. Well, to be honest with you, I saw some of the best skies ever in Florida. Um, yeah, best skies I've ever seen in Florida and California. I nearly started talking in American accent then, just as I mentioned those words. But they are two of my favorite places. So I've been about 8 times to America so far. I love it. But yeah, skies are. Sometimes I'll wake up in the night at dawn here, and if it's, I always look out the window. If there's something there, I'll get my camera out and I'll start taking pictures because there, I can take any sky, doesn't matter what sky, and I can then use that sky in any painting. So I take the sky, I'll use that for any landscape, then I'll use the sky colors to connect with the rest of the landscape. And that's why working from photographs doesn't really work too well, because it doesn't, I don't really, so anyway. But yes.
Do you use the pearlescent or metallic colors was a question earlier on.
It's just not for me. I'm sure they're amazing, but I don't have any need to do that. I do skies, landscapes, seascapes, animals. So the pearlescent, I really don't need those.
And a few people are asking about your workshops and your classes. So lesdarlow.com.
Just lesdarlow.com. There's a series of workshops, paint-alongs, all sorts of things happening. Bring the world together. Let's paint together.
Yes, absolutely. Especially now.
We'll have lots of fun. A glass of wine or two, pizza, things. We'll have fun while we paint.
That's great. People, I mean, we missed a few questions, but I think generally we got a lot of the questions. But I'd like to just remind everyone that at the beginning I mentioned that there's a list of frequently asked questions on PanPastel on the page where you signed up. So it's at the paintdrawblend.com, or you can go to panpastel.com, and the blog at the top, it's linked on the top of the page at our website. Les's materials are listed there, so you can print that off. Les's links are on there, so you can find him if you can't find him through social media. And then if you still have a question that we didn't cover, and I apologize if we didn't, there's a form, and you can submit a question to us and we'll answer it as quickly as we can. So I think, Les, do you have anything else to say?
No, just that I'm so grateful that the SAA in the UK asked me to try PanPastels and give my personal opinion on them. Otherwise, I may have never found them, and that would have been devastating for my career. And I love them. I love them intensely. I love them to pieces. They've changed the way I paint, the way I think about painting, and I think they've made me a better artist.
Well, that's great. Well, it's a combination. It's the materials. We put them out there, and then artists take them and make them their own. So there are no rules.
I know a lot of artists still don't get them. They still don't know what to do with them. And I know they don't. They struggle. They're like, I don't know how to use them. I know there's a lot of resources out there, but I think you have to sort of get out there and experiment with them. There's such a creative medium.
Yeah. Once you make those first few marks,
yeah,
that's what you need. Everyone is so grateful. They're all thanking you, Les, in the chat.
Very welcome.
We really
love to see all you people from all around the world. Come and join us again.
Yes.
Please.
That was wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye. Stay safe. Wear a mask. Stay away from everyone. Not on here though.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Take care. 93, 92.
Bye.
86.
Have a wonderful day.
And
Thank
you. Stay safe.
You too.
Bye.
Fabulous. You're the best.
Oh.
Oh,
thank you
sweet.
guys, both of you. I love this PanPastel. I have the full giant set.
Oh, yeah.
I know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
So
Time for
kind
tea.
and generous. So kind and generous of you, Les. Thank you so very much.
You're very welcome. I've loved every minute of it. I really have.
From California.
Oh, California.
Arizona.
Arizona, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go now. Bye-bye.
Take care, bye. 54. They just don't want to go.
No, we don't.
I want to stay. I'd paint all night, me. It's all pure fun for me, believe me.
As long as you have a cup of tea, isn't that right?
As long as I have a cup of tea.
That's
yes.
right.
That's what we do in England. We have cups of tea. But after tea, it might be a beer.
My grandmother was English.
Oh, is she? $38. What fun. Well, I've enjoyed myself.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful, Les. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And there were lots of questions. We were trying to get to all of them, so people can still hopefully find us eventually with other questions.
Yeah, that's great.
My one question is how do you clean your sponges and preserve them for later use? It never got answered.
Well, just I can very simply.
If you don't mind, thank you.
No, all you do is once you've got a color on there, just take a little bit of the red, for instance. So you got a little bit of red on there. So if I take a paper towel and you wipe, I'm trying to use that, you wipe the sponge on a paper towel until the pigment disappears. It may stain the sponge, but then you can take, you see there's a little bit of red still there, but you take a yellow, for instance, yeah, and then paint with that, and nothing, see?
Right, right.
Well, there is a bit of yellow on there, but you use the paper towel just to get rid of the excess from the sponge, and you can paint with it again. And then after the session, I'll wash these in a little bit of soapy water and let them air dry naturally outside in the beautiful sunshine here. But we can't do that because it rains all the time.
Thank you. It was the soap and water I was wanting to know about.
Just afterwards, they've got to be completely dry to use.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's a dry medium. It must be dry. Otherwise, it turns to mush. But yes.
Thank you.
No problem.
Anyone else have any questions while we're still on for the last few minutes?
Is there another class scheduled?
No dust. No dust. I've never mentioned it. No dust. That's one of the biggest things as well, Bernie.
Yeah, well, actually, I answered, somebody came up in the chat room and said, after 40 hours of painting, how much dust is there compared to sticks? And I explained, and I'm sure your experience is the same. You can be working on an easel.
There's nothing here. I mean, at my workstation here, there's none. Especially with Pastelmat, it just sticks to the paper. It doesn't, it goes from the pan straight to the paper and embeds itself.
And a few people, somebody just asked there on audio about your classes and workshops. Is there a schedule?
Yeah, it's all on the website. Everything's on there, even the link to the world clock to tell you what time it actually is where you are and where I am.